The youngest was 22, the oldest 43. France mourning its loss in Mali. The 13 killed in the collision of two military helicopters on patrol, making for the biggest single-day casualty toll the French have known since 1983, serving as a reminder that nearly 7 years after the French military intervened to rout the jihadists in the north of Mali, the insurgency has relocated south and to the east in the inhospitable area bordering Niger and Burkina Faso. Why the resurgence? What's the plan? How does former colonial power France, with its 4,500 personnel on hand, avoid it becoming a quagmire and losing public support in both Bamako and Paris? How does a weak Malian state truly take control of its own destiny? Let's not forget that if France just lost 13 in an accident, back on November 1st, Mali lost 49 of its soldiers in an ambush. Failed states are where radical movements thrive. A new caliphate practically on Europe's doorstep would be a disaster all around. We're going to be asking our panel what they think about it and what they think about this Takuba initiative, a plan pushed by France to share the burden on patrolling the Sahara. Some hope it can even be the embryo of a European army. Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking, is it a quagmire and does France own it? Joining us, retired General Dominique Trinquant, former head of the French mission to the United Nations. How are you, sir?
Hi.
I want to welcome as well Nyagare Bakayoko, chair of the African Security Sector Network. Consultants, the think tank, describe what it is.
It is a think tank.
It's a think
working on the promotion of democratic governance of security.
All right, next to you, the editor-in-chief of Afrique Magazine, the monthly publication, Ziad Liman. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yeah, the emotion palpable in garrison towns throughout France. In the French alpine town of Gap, citizens break into Marseillaise to pay tribute to the 4 killed who hailed from the Light Mountain Infantry Brigade there. This while in Pau in southwestern France, they're mourning the 7 members of the French Army's 5th Helicopter Regiment. Next Monday is the date set for state honors at the National Armory. Les Invalides here in Paris. The black box from those 2 helicopters recovered from the so-called Three Borders area where the accident took place on a moonless night.
It was a difficult operation. It was a level 5 darkness, the complete dark of night. And we're talking about fighting conditions here. I really am talking about fighting here. It wasn't just an accident or a collision. This occurred during a combat situation with helicopters that are carrying out a reconnaissance mission in difficult conditions. And they are trying to detect elements on the ground. Helicopters and fighting planes in the French army don't have anti-collision equipment because they're flying in such close quarters.
Yeah, the emotion palpable, General Trinquant, at that press conference, in fact, the Army Chief of Staff, you could read it on his face.
Yes, of course. He was involved in combat himself. So when you have been involved in combat himself, you're not speaking of a book. You're speaking about real life and real death. And so I understand perfectly the way he was thinking when he was talking about that. He's giving the orders to do what's happened. And so when an operation like that have 13 dead at the same time, it's really a big burden for him. And it will be a big burden for the President of the Republic on Monday, when he will face the coffins in Les Invalides.
And we see that 13 killed in barracks across the country. What do you think? What's the frame of mind at those garrison towns?
This garrison, it's interesting because Pau and Gap are the 2 main garrisons. But I'm
going to interrupt you just to say hello to Emmanuel Iga, who's arriving. Paris traffic couldn't keep him away.
Paris, not a very unusual traffic today, though. I think demonstrations in
Paris.
Yeah. The 2 major garrisons concerned by this death are Gap and Pau, and this shows that the garrison are very close from the regiment. In fact, the people are living in the garrison. in the city, and the city know when the people are going on operation, when they are coming back. They know all that. The city is living with the regiments, and so when there are losses like that, I think that everybody is concerned by that.
See, the amount front page headlines all over in France. Generally, what would you say the mood is right now here?
Emotion. It's the number is tragically spectacular. I mean, 13 boys killed in the desert, and one soldier was killed about 2 weeks ago, I think, on a landmine. One soldier is the same tragic death, but 13 people in the same operation is like a huge loss. And secondly, it's something that reminds the French people that they have an army operating outside their country. I mean, this is something we tend to forget. There's about 7,000 people, French army personnel around the world, more than 4,000 in Africa. Most of them are in some sort of combat situation, Middle East, Sahel. And we tend to forget these guys because they're professionals, basically. There's no conscription. It's something, not very incarnated. And so when we have a tragedy like that, people feel the emotion because they know they realize they have an army and that army is on operations. And there's another tragic story in that story is the death of the son of a senator, which also makes this tragedy something close to everybody.
Yeah, the son of a member of the French Senate who was killed in that. Niagare Bakayoko, you heard there the Army Chief of Staff in those remarks saying this wasn't an accident, this was on a combat mission.
Yes, it was a combat mission. So that's very important also to understand what are the conditions on the ground, which are very, very tough. It's not usually everybody is saying, yes, but what are they doing exactly? And now, after this incident, but this working incident, in fact, because they were fighting, we can see exactly what is at stake in this conflict.
And in this particular...
How rude is the environment?
They'd had a tip-off, apparently, of a group that they'd been chasing, and they'd been chasing them for several days.
Yeah. That's the role of the commandos. I mean, they are chasing the special forces on the ground, were chasing the people. This jihadist group was on the street border. There is a hiding site, which is a natural reserve where the jihadists are hiding. And so they were trying to have contact with them. They were chasing them, and probably when the nightfall, they were crossing a small river, not a river, but and without water.
Because some people say, General, some people say that, with the modern army now, soon you won't need helicopters. You just have drones.
No. That's not true. That's not true. First, you need to identify to be sure that they are terrorists, that they are jihadists. You need to follow them, to find where they are, to find where they are gathering, because, they're on motorbike, so you've got people everywhere. But when they are gathering, this is at that time that you need to destroy them. And so when the nightfall, they asked for air support, and the air support was sent with an aircraft, a Mirage 2000, and also the 3 helicopters, 2 attack helicopters and 1 transport helicopter. The transport helicopter is here with a team of special commando. Where there is a problem, they will land and help the people on the ground. And the 2 other attack helicopters are providing firepower. And so it's one of these helicopters who hits the other helicopter, and then they fall down, 2 of them.
We can only speculate because we don't know what's in the black boxes yet, but we do know that it was a moonless night.
Yeah.
The fact that it was pitch dark, does that make a difference?
Oh, yes, of course. It's a night level 5, meaning that you've got no moon, probably clouds. It's very difficult. They are looking with their goggles, and in the goggles, you can't see on the side. You see only in front of you, and what you see is green. Light green or dark green, but green. And so it's difficult when you are flying at 150 kilometers per hour, at 10, 15 meters from the ground. It's very difficult. They are very well trained on that, but you never know if you can't have an incident like that.
All right, 4,500 French personnel in Mali, and as part of the fallout, there's the shock, and also, as Ziad was saying, a reminder that we do have soldiers there. It's called Operation Barkhane, and some calling for review of the aims and objectives amid what we've seen is a growing spate of attacks in that region. Pierre Delrieux has more.
It's France's largest overseas military operation. Launched in 2014, Barkhane is the leading anti-terrorist effort in the African Sahel region, spanning an area as large as Europe, mostly desert, in Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger and Chad. With a mandate to operate across borders, Barkhane's aim is to quell jihadist expansion and provide a long-term solution to local security issues.
The area Operation Barkhane currently covers is extensive and quite tense, and the pressure from terrorist groups is extremely high.
The G5 Sahel, the 5 Western African countries fighting alongside France in the operation, are among the poorest in the world. Economically and politically fragile states struggling to ensure their own national security. But 5 years in, Operation Barkhane has yet to reach its goals. The presence of 4,500 French soldiers, along with 13,000 UN peacekeepers and African troops, has failed to stop the jihadist expansion. Different groups in different zones claiming allegiance to either Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State organization, or Ansarul Islam in Burkina Faso.
It's getting more and more complicated because France is alone. There isn't really a European support. Sure, there's a UN mission, but the only troops involved in combat are the French, despite France's calls on some European special forces to join Operation Barkhane.
As jihadist groups adapt to the military presence, the situation on the ground is increasingly complicated, leading some observers to draw parallels between Operation Barkhane in the Sahel and America's involvement in Afghanistan. Despite criticism and a heavy death toll of 41 French soldiers killed in over 5 years, France has vowed to continue its mission, with no apparent end in sight for Operation Barkhane.
Emmanuel Iga, is this France's Afghanistan?
Well, it's not exactly the same situation. Afghanistan was just one country. And here we are dealing with, 5, 6 countries in minimum. I think countries that might total...
Because you could add your Nigeria to that.
We have Nigeria, then we are in a territory that is much beyond the size of Europe, Western Europe. And so these are things that are very, very difficult even for the best army in the world to cover. And I think the issue now is what Antoine Glaser was just talking about in the video. France seems to be terribly alone in this struggle. We have a little support coming from a few countries like Denmark, Estonia, or the USA, Great Britain, etc. I think France is making a lot of effort now to bring more countries on board. What is surprising me is that we are not seeing a very active, very strong engagement from the West African Organization, the Economic Community of West African States, which used to have the capacity to intervene in these kind of situations with the force they call the ECOMOG.
We saw ECOMOG in places like Liberia in the past.
And they were pretty successful in Liberia, Sierra Leone, etc. And I'm also a bit worried that we are not hearing much from the African Union. We are not seeing much engagement. It's like they've outsourced the issue of security of the Sahel to the countries like France, the Western powers, etc.
Sorry. Yes. Thank you. I cannot completely agree with you because I think we don't have to forget that the first intervention in Mali was, in fact, an intervention by forces from ECOWAS under the banner of the African Union. It was the AFISMA mission. It's very important to say they were the first one to be on the ground.
So
Where
are they now?
You had the Ouagadougou conference 1 month ago I would say, which had promised to fundraise 1 billion to fund this. And also, you have the UMOA, which is another organization. I don't think that the problem is that the African actors are not there. The problem is that there are too many African players which is competing on the ground, because you have lots of organizations, and the G5 Sahel is just a new one. It's just a newcomer.
Yeah. I think it's very important. We've discussed that to have the sheer size of the place. Yeah. I mean, we're talking thousands of miles east-west and hundreds of miles south-north, and we're talking about the Sahel, but you can take the line all the way to Somalia, all the way to Ethiopia, and it's the same fault line that is, from Dakar to Somalia. So that's first thing. Second thing, to have a debate about African involvement in this issue is a very important discussion. States, are they able to fight? Do they have enough political legitimacy to assemble their population into the fight? We have to ask the question about the African military. When you see the staggering level of Malian casualties, there's a problem. There's either a military problem or a motivation problem or something. You don't get 45 guys killed in a garrison without having a problem.
Yeah, that was earlier this month.
I think this is a very good discussion. But again, how can the international community let the French do the job alone? I mean, this is ridiculous, because it's poor, because it's far, because it's not the Middle East, because there's no oil, maybe, and there is oil actually in Niger, Nigeria, and everywhere. So they think it's not strategically important, and we can go on those low warfare intensity thing. But this is very important. If these guys come to Algeria or to Libya or to anywhere, they can go through immigration, path and get to Europe. I mean, it's close to us. It's 3, 4, 5 hours, and they can get to the coast. They can get to Lagos. They can go to Abidjan. They can get to Cotonou. They can get to all those cities on the coast. So it's a major issue, and I think this has to be a debate. The French, in the new alternative thing that you were discussing, Macron is trying to raise, energy around that. I think it's a huge debate, and it has to be put on the table.
All right. Well, can other European nations pick up the mantle? I'm going to put that to you, General. When we come back, stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at how to stop the current spike in insurgent attacks in Mali and neighboring countries. It's been nearly 7 years since France intervened to stop jihadists from overrunning that landlocked West African nation. We're talking about it with retired General Dominique Trinquant, former French head at the United Nations mission there. Niagale Bakayoko, chair of the African Security Sector Network think tank. With us as well, political consultant and academic Emmanuel Iga, and the editor-in-chief of Afrique Magazine, the monthly, Ziad Liman. Yeah, we were talking before the break about the impacts of that. Those 13 French soldiers killed on patrol on Monday. Measure as well the November 1st attack against a Malian army base near Menaka. Quite spectacular. 49 Malian soldiers killed when they were suddenly overrun by twice as many insurgents on motorbikes. The radicals filmed their attack and posted it on internet before disappearing into thin air.
You are absolutely right to be afraid. I myself, the Minister of Defense, am afraid. I want to reach the strength of other armies. Any army in the world that has all our problems would not fare well.
All right, some straight talk from Mali's defense minister, who, by the way, right now is in the company of his French counterpart in Gao in the north of the country. Meanwhile, over in Strasbourg, there was this Wednesday the new European Commission approved, and there, the new head, Ursula von der Leyen, reacting to Emmanuel Macron's recent remark that NATO was experiencing brain death.
NATO will always be collective defense without any question. And Article 5 will always be NATO. And NATO is certainly the strongest military alliance in the world. The European Union will never be a military alliance. The European Union is completely different.
The European Union is completely different. General Trinquant, bringing it back to what we're talking about here, there are EU troops present in Mali, but they're not in combat situations.
They are not EU troops. They are European country providing troops, which is something a bit different. The EU organization is providing only a team for training the Malian army, which is a bit different. Just I want to go back on one point on the African contingents, because Nagele is right. The first one to be on the ground were the African. The problem is that after 6 months, they've got no money. They can't continue the operation. Exactly. And that's why currently inside MINUSMA, a lot of this country are contingents from the MINUSMA. So this is just a point I wanted to make. And on the MINUSMA,
but also the job of peacekeepers is different. Is different from the job of what the French are doing.
Of course, the French forces, Barkhane, is targeting jihadists. MINUSMA is here to provide security for the population. Just remember that MINUSMA, had suffered 250 lost. So we must keep that in mind, making that they are paying their tribute too. Second point on the European. My impression, yes, they are not present in sufficient number. They should be there. Our problem, and we saw that in Brussels, is that for European country, most of the European country are facing east, not south. The threat is on the east, not in the south. France is the only one to be involved in the south. And because of different contingents, you've got the British, the Danes, the Estonians, several are in small numbers. But also because Mrs. Parley asked a coalition of special forces.
The French defense minister.
Yeah, to the operation to gather and fight together. I think this will provide this European capital with intelligence they don't have currently. And probably they will. It will take time, but they will understand that the threat is also in the south, because every day they will receive reports from their troops, and so they will think about that.
And at the end of the day, who's helped the most since 2013 among Western nations? Well, it's the United States. They set up that drone base in Niamey a couple of years back.
Yes, that's true. But I think it is important because we were talking about the role of the European Union. That's true. The EUTM mission is there to train, but not only to train, also to advise and to help to reform the Malian military. And this is a key point because everybody is complaining about the lack of operationality of the Malian army. But the question is that it's not possible, according to me, to only address these operational aspects. There is also a need to focus on governance, which UTM is doing, but also to focus on human rights, which the MINUSMA is doing. Maybe something missing is focusing on the military condition, because it is important.
But you heard Ziad earlier saying how one of the problems may be that Malians, because we've trained, there's been training for African armies for decades.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. Training is not enough. Working on governance, working on how budgets are done, working on oversight mechanism, working also on military condition. Because it's very important to say that those soldiers, when they are killed, sometimes they are not, their family never saw anything, and they have no assistance or not enough often. And what exactly are they earning while they are killed on the ground? It is really very, very small amount. I don't know exactly, but 2 years ago it was only around 10 euros. So this is also very important. Reforming an army is not only about operationality on the ground. That's very important.
Yes, just remember that in 2012, when there was the coup in Mali, it was a captain who take the lead, and all the generals were afraid about what the captain was doing with his small troops. There is really a problem of governance.
And now it's nearly 7 years later, Emmanuel Liga?
Yes, I think what Nyagali is saying is it just all summarizes into the big issue of national development. That is what it is. It's all the aspects of national development not taking placed correctly in a country like Mali. And it's not only Mali, though, but that's causing all these uprisings left and right and making it very difficult to stabilize the country. I think one thing you should have added to the list you gave, too, you were talking of the areas we need to focus on. And I think it's this peace agreement
of course.
that was signed between Malian government and the other parties, the rebels and other groups that in the north.
Groups from the north.
From the north, brokered by Algeria, and which was signed in way back, as far as back as I think 2015, and nothing is happening. This is the only thing that we need to do now to ensure that there will be a possibility to stabilize the situation in Mali. There has to be peace.
The thing is, most of these groups, they don't want peace. They don't want negotiation. They don't want discussion. The Al-Qaeda affiliates, the Islamic State affiliates, the Mohabitin, all these guys, they don't want that. They want to take over. That's the plan. That's the theory. That's the ideology. That's the view of the world. Exactly like in Iraq. Same thing. We're taking the land because it's our way. So you can discuss for years.
Are they taking the land? Is that what they want? Do they want a caliphate, or do they just want to do
Listen, you can
business?
have discussion.
Is it ideology? What's it about?
You can have nation branding with some groups like the Tuaregs and, have a discussion about how you organize federally, locally the country. But the jihadists, they're not here to discuss peace. They're here to take over, and they don't want to discuss with you, and they don't want to discuss with you as a state. So the war is not an option. You have to wage that war, and you have to raise your capabilities to wage that war. So the discussion is there. And second thing, there's so many issues at hand: economics, development, government, democracy, legitimacy. You have to tell the opinions in France and in Africa. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a long story, maybe years. And you have to tell the French people, because the French people are putting their soldiers on the ground, they're putting their guys on the ground. You have to tell them it's going to be a long story. It's not going to end tomorrow. And building states in Western Africa is going to take a while. A powerful state like Nigeria cannot handle the Boko Haram insurgency in the north, because these guys, they don't want to discuss with the federal states. They don't want to have a deal with the federal state. They want to be the state.
General Tancon, we saw far-left members of parliament here in France who are saying maybe it's time to rethink our presence in Mali.
I mean, it's not time. You got to rethink all the time. But when 13 soldiers are killed, it's not the right time to discuss about that. Everybody should gather and say our soldiers have been killed in this operation because they are defending our freedom and the freedom of the people of Mali. That's not the time to discuss that. We have to discuss it, of course, but we have to discuss it. Why the MP didn't discuss that before? Ask for a debate in Parliament. Just discuss that now. It's not the right time to say that.
It's just a political move.
All right, the timing is off. You're saying we're talking about the factors that the European nations might want to block out, as Ziad was saying, or ignore. At the recent Paris Peace Forum, one of those G5 Sahel nations, Niger, its president, Mahamadou Issoufou, calling for more help.
Normally, by installing security forces, the international community must mobilize. But we don't feel this solidarity from the international community, which has its eyes elsewhere, while it is responsible for what happened in Libya.
Libya. So he's saying basically that because with the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, that was considered, Niagari Bakayoko, as one of the triggers for the insurgency running loose in other parts of the Sahel, and they're still facing that fallout today.
Clearly, there has been a destabilization of Libya, and the difference between the operation in Libya and the Serval operation is that there has been a follow-up after Serval operation. It's not perfect, but there have been African troops, there have been the UN, and after Gaddafi was overthrown, nothing happened, and the international coalition simply left. And And that's part of the problem. And all African countries, including President Issoufou, is clearly saying there were no consultation. We have not been informed in advance that the operation will occur.
President Issoufou even said that he learned about the operation by
news,
the radio in
by
the morning,
radio, yes.
which is not, people who are bordering the operation, it's not possible to do like that. And I agree with what Nergele say. You destabilize a country. When you destabilize, you know that you will be there for a long time, and you need to invest and to go there. I was in Tripoli just after this operation, and I was struck by the fact that I was visiting the Air Force, the Navy, but no army. Why? Because the militia was not disarmed, and the militia was paid individually, not the boss controlling the militia, but individually. So in fact, the people, they've got a job for several years now, where fighting, having a block road, provide more money than going to work. And so that's why they don't want to discuss now.
Today, we still have we have dueling governments in Libya. If you solve Libya, do you solve Mali? Do you solve Niger? Do you solve...
I mean, when you messed up for 10 years, it takes another 10 years to clean the whole mess, because even if Libya gets his mess together, which is not earlier, something that's come earlier, the issue about alternative options, I mean, to talk about the European Union, I think, is a false discussion. I agree with you. We're talking about European states that have a stake, direct stake of security, and they have to understand that their security is at stake, including Denmark, including Germany, including Sweden, because this guy, if they move up, they will move all around. And we know that they've been attacking, terrorist action in Europe have been going on for more than 10 years now. So and when you talk about East, there is also Southeast, Turkey, Middle East, etc. And the Middle East is connected to Africa, because these guys that were in the Middle East, the Islamic states, they have moved first to Libya and then south. And so it's connected. You have to explain that to the public opinion. It's crucial to understand that what's going on there is part of what will happen here. And second thing concerning President Issoufou, the opinion in Africa, they don't understand why you put so much means on Syria. So much, planes, tanks, AWACS, whatever, America and stuff. And you have like 10, maybe you can correct me, maybe 10 Mirage 2000 on location in Barkhane. More?
Less than that.
Less than that, it's even worse. So we're talking about 5-6 fighting jets being located in Barkhane, and we talked about hundreds of jets in the Middle East to fight the Islamic State. I'm not saying it's the same, but public opinion has to understand why, on one hand, you've been putting so much resources, and on the other hand, you're not doing it.
And also, I concur, but also I think it is important, yes, to explain that the fight will be long, but also maybe to stop all those very spectacular announcements. Yes, we have we promised to give hundreds of million, and yes, we will send special forces, and yes, we will have newcomers such as Chadian. No, it will be very long. This morning, the chief of staff was very clear, very realistic about this, and it is important, I think, to explain this.
I think once again we have to come back to underline the importance of the peace talks. We have to find a way through the peace.
But you heard Ziad Liman break down into two groups. There are armed groups that are separatists,
the jihadists,
and then there are insurgents who are radicals and don't want to negotiate with anyone.
So let's deal with the ones that we can talk with.
Legitimacy.
Let's start with that and isolate the jihadists, if possible, at a certain stage. And then we can now form a larger force with those we would have made peace with to deal with those jihadists. I think the solution, if we look at all these kinds of wars and crises across the world, the solution has never been military alone. It has never been also peace talks alone. Peace talks have to go along with military pressure on these jihadists. I think the rebels are not giving that much problem. Now is the jihadists. The issue is getting the Malian government and the rebels to really implement the peace accord.
Rewind the clock to 2013. There was the sense of a chance to get a fresh start. You'd had, after a coup, elections. democratically elected president in Bamako, and the sense that, you could address problems throughout the country, but the writing was already on the wall back then. In 2013, the France 24 debate went to Gao in the north, and people said nobody's talking to us. There's nothing coming from the capital. We're not having any discussion.
That's the problem.
Yes, but sorry. No, just to say, yes, I agree. The peace agreement is very important, but one of the problems is that today the conflict has expanded, including in central Mali, where conflictuality is not exactly the same kind. Now you have the problem of communitarization of security, which is a very, very big problem.
And the land pressure issue between herders and farmers.
Exactly. This is linked to resources. And I think just to mention that everybody thinks, yes, no need to invest too much on the military, we need for development policies. But it is also important to look at what have been the consequences of those development policies, because the relationships between farmers and herders are also a result of those policies which have been focusing on agriculture. So development also, I think, has to be restored.
That attack near Menaka at the start of the month, where 49 Malian soldiers were killed, Emmanuel Iga, the attackers, speaking Fula, some of them on the tapes they put on the internet, this is a problem that is now affecting the whole region, including Nigeria.
Yes, there's the communal clashes, and herders, farmers. I think there is no country in the Sahel now that is excluded.
Because old right-of-ways for cattle have been blocked off.
Yes. And all because, of course, we are not really progressing. We are still rearing cattle in the traditional way, taking them all over the place to look for pasture, green pasture. And that brings clashes with farmer communities. So we need to change our ways of production of cattle, and
it brings us back to the question I asked you earlier, Ziad, which is this about ideology as you described it, or is it about economics and
as we said, there's too many things going on at the same time. Again, the herders and sedentary people, it's not a new story. It's been there in Africa for centuries. Exactly. And when the state was more operational, when the state was able to arrange pathways, discussions, when the state was functional, these conflicts, they didn't go out in an all-out war. So the fact that these local conflicts are becoming violent and dangerous, and the fact that the jihadists can manipulate these people and, bring them some sort of idea of purity and independence, it's because the states are weak. Normally, it's the job of the states to deal with these issues. So I think, again, there's two discussions. The African states, how can they build up in terms of governance, in this region, governance, military operability, and democracy? That's one. And two, how can we help them as Western powers, international powers, to bring real means, not, 5 Mirage 2000 that we ask the French to foot up the bill. How can the Americans be more operational? The Americans are very prudent. They lost, if you remember, we talk about the 13
Niger.
guys, but in Niger they lost
Special forces.
Special forces.
Yeah, which was a tragedy for them too. So, on the ground, we need means. And I agree with you, peace is always an option, but you need means on the ground.
And I agree, but the problem is that the means will come from European country, not from the American. The American are already leaving Middle East. They are very happy that the French.
President, yes.
They are very happy that the French are leading in Africa. They help us a lot in intelligence, but they don't want to involve their troops. You're right. Where the special forces were in ambush, it was the French who intervened to save them.
Yeah.
Because so I think that really the key of that is that Africa is just at the back door of Europe. In terms of demography, in terms of economy,
security,
and in terms of security. So we need to convince the European country and we organize how to do that to be involved in this region.
All right, as attacks move away from the north of Mali to that three borders area where that happened, they're not just encroaching on farmland. There's gold in the Sahel, some mined by big international firms, some by wildcat panhandlers. At the start of the month, gunmen attacked a military-escorted convoy of Canadian mining company in Burkina Faso, killing at least 37. This 40 kilometers from its Bongu site. The Economist recently wrote a story where it published a map showing gold mining areas and sites of recent attacks and put them together. Attacks that have forced the locals to flee, like this former miner who's now displaced to the capital, Ouagadougou.
The terrorists live with us. They went out to kill and came back to bother us. We didn't know what to do. We couldn't run away because if we tried, they could catch us and accuse us of betraying them. We really didn't know where to go.
This issue of the jihadist movement sort of following now where the gold mines are.
Once again, I'm not sure we have to focus on jihadists. I don't think that only jihadists are interested in gold mines. It is also very important to see that there are also a lot of criminal actors in the area. And this is also part of the problem on how to address this situation. Because now I think that the question is to differentiate the actors, which in essence are the military, who have to destroy an enemy, and the other, which are the policemen, the police forces, who have to prosecute them. Because it is very important also to dismantle networks who are often linked economically to the jihadist group as well. But I think it is very, very important not to only focus on this jihadist narrative. Yes, it is a big part of the problem, but I don't think that only focusing on this aspect will help solve the situation.
I think there is a mixture. I mean, the jihadists need money. They are trafficking drugs, they are taking gold, they are taking people. They need money to run their death business, because this is what it is, to run the country as they want. And sometimes there is a mixture between these jihadists and the criminals. The criminals join the jihadists, or the jihadists join the criminal to have the money. And so it is sometimes a bit difficult to try to understand what's the difference between both of them. And if the situation stay longer and longer, it will be more and more difficult, because this is an economy in its own, which is built by these people.
Emmanuel, final word?
Yeah, no, just to say that we are talking about criminals. It looks like, we are talking of, petty criminals that go to the gold mines.
In this case, they attacked a convoy with 5 buses and military protection.
And that shows that these are people that are well backed up by influential personalities, sometimes, across these countries. A place like Zamfara State in Nigeria, which also has gold mines, has, a security problem that has blossomed into a serious crisis, also like in Mali, because of the gold mines there. And we know in Nigeria that certain influential personalities are behind the traffic around the gold mines.
In 20 seconds, final word?
Again, one part of the solution is within the African states, and one part of the solution is within the Western powers, because it's part of their security. I think, and the fact that President Macron and the team around them are thinking about what they call new alternatives. I don't know the word you used at the beginning of our broadcast.
The Takuba initiative.
Yeah, well, I think it's normal, it's necessary, because when you see that militarily you're not gaining and you're not winning, you have to change your mindset and see how we can, both militarily and politically, gain your objectives.
Ziad Liman, many thanks. I want to thank as well Nyagade Bakayoko for being with us. General Dominique Trinquant, Emmanuel Iga, thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.